What's up, everyone? It is Professor Cinephile. I know you guys are tired of me. It's been a while, right? Partly because I've gotten into writing more of my reviews of films. Sometimes I go back and forth with that, right? I need to be better. I've also been like super, super, super busy. So I'm sorry. And for example, like my review of Michael is actually a written one. It's a long form essay. And so that is on my Patreon. So if you subscribe, patreon.com/Feminist Jones, you can read my Michael review there. I also have my Letterbox account, which is I'm Professor Cinephile there. I think it's PROF Cinephile on there. So you can check out my reviews there. And I know that some people are really waiting for me to review Is God Is. It's a new film that is out. And I will be doing so with Dr. Deanna Daniels, who is a friend and colleague, and she really focuses on like horror and religion and things like that. And so she and I are going to have a conversation about that and record it and share with you. So that will be an interesting experience. It's going to come up. It's coming soon. Don't worry about it. We kind of want people to sit with this film for a little bit, and then we'll share our thoughts. But this time, I'm actually going to be talking about the Miss Pat Show. Um, and I've talked about this show before on my Patreon and things like that. But there was something that came up in season 5 that I just wanted to kind of address. But spoiler alert, I will be talking about things that happen in the show. So you may want to, if you've never seen it before, you may want to, not watch this. So the show, what is the premise of the show? So one of the things that I love is that this is a very refreshing show. Ms. Pat show is based on the life of Ms. Pat. She is a comic, a black woman comic or comedian, who had a really interesting life. I mean, she has overcome a lot. She's been through a lot. She's seen a lot. And I think that with the life that she had, she turned it around and became a stand-up comedian and began telling her story in these really funny ways. And I think that insight that she's had, I mean, she's experienced, incarceration, drug abuse, teen pregnancy, all these things. And to be able to take kind of those experiences and make them funny, right? It's one of the things that is wonderful about, comedy and how it can address social issues and still make us laugh and get us to think. And that translates very well into the show. I've watched all 5 seasons now, and it streams. I believe it was on BET Plus first. You can find it on Paramount Plus. You can find it, The Ms. Pat Show, which I also like that it's Ms. and not like Miss or Mrs. I love it. So the premise of the show, she is this woman. She is married. She had children before she got married, and they're older children. She got married. She had 2 more children. And so she lives in this home with her family, excuse me, and they they're a black family. They're a black family in the Midwest. And there's, nuances related to that as well. What I really love about the show is that it addresses a lot of political issues, a lot of current issues, in really important ways. Miss Pat is an older woman, right? So I'm a woman. I'm almost 50 years old. So it's really important to like have more of these shows with women that are my age and in my age group. That was one of the things I was just having a big issue with television. It's just like everything is so young and catering to like younger millennials and Gen Z. And it's just like, hey, us older Gen X women, and I'm actually young Gen X, but like we're here, especially within Black media, right? So, and the other thing is that if you are familiar with Black sitcoms, most of them historically have centered men, right? They centered around men. You think of Bill Cosby, you think of Steve Harvey, Damon Wayans, Cedric the Entertainer, folks like that, Robert Townsend. A lot of them would have these major, major, major Black comics, Martin even, right? Who would have these shows and kind of they were in the center and built their lives around them. Either they had families or it was about them and their friends, things like that. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but because it happens also within white media, but rarely do we get to see a black woman comic shine in this way, but also the black mother to be kind of the central figure in the story, which actually aligns with, traditional African ways of being, right? The mother is the center of everything. So that's one of the reasons I really, really, really love this show. Another show that is similar to that is The Upshaws, starring Kim Fields. While I don't think that it centers around Regina, the character, I think she is the primary, focus there. But anyway, so this show has addressed things like um, ICE deportations, immigration, Black and Brown solidarity. It has discussed trans issues. One of the characters realizes that his father, who he felt abandoned him, is actually a trans woman. That was, the way they handled that was really interesting. They talked about older women having abortion after having kids and being married. Very big topic. Stress, mental health, all of those wonderful things. Another show that it reminded me of is One Day at a Time, which is about a Latino family, right? So it's that kind of stuff. I tend to like that. However, season five has been interesting, and I think that they are constantly like pushing and looking for more things to discuss. And something came up in season five that I was just kind of like, I don't like the way y'all handle that. And I think it's important when we're critiquing Black media to extend grace and to understand that, people are writing what they know. But as a professor, and as somebody who has actually like borne witness to this kind of thing, I was thinking that they could have done a better job. So their daughter goes off to college and she's very, very smart. Very young black feminist, rah rah kind of young woman. And she goes to college and she is taking a class, or she wants to get into a class on like kind of these black feminist writers, talking about Hooks, Audre Lorde, things like that, right? She's really excited to get into this class. She realizes that the teacher is actually this young black man, and he gets her into the class, and she starts to take the class. He's talking about, all about love with Bell Hooks, and there's a scene where she challenges him, and she's just like, basically like, we're still talking about Bell Hooks. Why haven't I thought we were going to move on to other people, which I actually appreciated that because how many weeks do you need to talk about all about love? No shade, no tea, but it's not actually a hard book to read, right? But the conversation was that, the other students just weren't there, right? Which is also real for a lot of us professors. It's kind of like adjusting, like, where are the students? Are they actually reading this? Are they understanding? Do we need to stay longer with this, etc.? So she pushes back. She's very bright. She's like literally ahead of everybody. And he likes that. He's like, thank you for challenging me and I will, move forward. Who would you suggest? And so she starts giving him recommendations and all these things like that. Now, first of all, as a professor, you don't need to be taking recommendations from your students. If you're teaching and you're supposed to be the subject matter expert, you should already know. It's one thing to say, I'm going to stay with bell hooks because I need more time with it. It's a different thing to ask the student, well, who should I teach? That was kind of weird. But okay, we'll let them have that. So then they end up like chatting with each other, texting each other, or what have you. First red flag. Um, Professors really don't need to be engaging students, especially late at night, texting them about things that are not related to the class. It's one thing to build a connection with the student. You have office hours, you can talk about things going on in the world and to build a rapport and to look out for them. The way that this is going about, they're letting you know this is going to be an inappropriate relationship, right? So he eventually invites her. Well, she shoots her shot in some way. Like, and I had an issue with this as well too. So kind of making it seem like she's the aggressor here, but her roommate like eggs her on, tells her, to invite him out to meet for breakfast or something like that. And the way her roommate is talking about it is like she's kind of encouraging her to sleep with her professor. And I had an issue with that. One, because the roommate is a darker skinned black woman, young black woman. And what we tend to see in these tropes is that like they will depict the darker skinned black woman as being more sexually promiscuous. We saw that a little bit in if you think of Coming to America, the with the Patrice character, how she was kind of depicted as kind of wild and all over the place and things like that. That tends to happen in film and television. So I had an issue with that. But also, why would this young black woman going to college encourage her new roommate, a person that she barely knows, to sleep with her professor? I found that to be incredibly weird, right? Because it did not give this young woman the brain power, right? To be like, no, this is wrong, right? And so why didn't we recognize that? And if that's the case, because we do know that Black girls do experience sexual abuse and assault and harassment and all these things before they turn 18. Perhaps there could have been a conversation about why this roommate was encouraging her to sleep with her professor. Like, where was that coming from? But we're not going to get a lot of that in a situation comedy, right? So she goes and she has breakfast. It becomes very clear that there is something inappropriate happening here. And eventually there's a class, she stays behind, and he ends up like kissing her and stuff like that. And I'm just like, and I was also bothered by the audience cheering this on. They were like, ooh, like it was a sexy thing. There's nothing sexy about the relationship, a romantic relationship between a professor and a student. I don't know who needs to hear that. I don't know if that needs to be reiterated, but it is inappropriate. Does it happen? Yes. Yes, it does. Is it wrong? Yes, it is. And the fact that this young man, he was young, he was definitely younger, within her age range. I mean, she is 18 or what have you. That's it's not about legality and consent and things like that. It's about the power dynamic of a teacher-student relationship, right? And I'm just thinking about how recently in the news in the last few months, we have been seeing so many stories of Black male educators or Black men working in schools who have been like sexually violating these young girls. And so that's on my mind as I'm watching this. Um, and so I was put off by that. And I was really bothered by the audience responding like this was cute or sexy or cool. But I guess that kind of speaks to how our community thinks about these things, right? And that's really messed up. But anyway, she ends up this is the first time she has sex, and it's with her professor. And that, I mean, they kind of glossed over that a bit. But she kind of talks to her brother about it, and he's supportive but also kind of like questioning her, but not in the way that we needed him to as a brother. As a brother, he was focused more on the fact that the professor was playing her, because what ends up happening is, he gets cold on her. He doesn't return her calls. He's kind of distant. He goes back to calling her by her last name and all these things. And her brother is focused more on this as like, this is a boyfriend who jilted her versus this is a professor who preyed on her. And so they have this scene where she goes in and she goes into class to talk to him, to confront him about this, because her friend is like, you need to crash out on him. No, you don't need to crash out on him. You need to go to the Title IX office. You need to report him because he has violated you. Now, again, they presented her almost as the aggressor. So I imagine in her head, the character's head, she's not thinking, oh, he did something wrong, other than kind of playing me for a fool. She goes into the classroom. She, confronts him in front of all these other students. There's another young woman there that's very flirty with him, touching on his shoulder and all these things. And so this leans into the jealousy thing. Now she's crashing out because she's jealous that he's preying on another student. No, I don't like the way that that was written. I don't like how they approached that. At no point was there criticism of the fact that this was a professor who was preying on a student, manipulating a student, exploiting a student. Not just one, multiple. They played it into this kind of love triangle and, oh, he dissed me after he stole my V card or whatever. No. And I think that when we're talking about Black media, when we're talking about depictions of Black women, we're talking about sex and sexuality and these kinds of issues, we have a responsibility to confront it. It's one thing to like, and I think within comedy, comedy, well, they'll set up the joke, they'll set up the punchline, and then they'll hit the punch. Excuse me for my nose. But a lot of times that punch offers a solution or it offers commentary that is corrective. In this instance, it was not. And I was very disappointed because that doesn't seem like how Ms. Pat would go about it. Now, it was a cliffhanger or what have you. And so maybe, if we get a season six, they'll address it. But then it ends up with a cliffhanger where she's pregnant. right? Which is kind of cheesy. That's very old school sitcom that was tied up a little too tight. Um, and considering they already, excuse me, considering they already approached the abortion thing, I don't know where they're going to go with that. But that was a little too nothing, nothing. No point did anybody have a conversation about how it's wrong for the professor to be involved with the student. And at a time when we are seeing more pomp and circumstance around Black people going to college, with the attacks on DEI, and we're seeing more students going back to HBCUs, for example. We're seeing more Black people getting doctorates, PhDs, becoming professors. Shout out. Um, This is a conversation we need to have. Now, it's happening in K through 12, and we can easily recognize that, right? Because they're underage. And even then, we still have a community that supports when it's young men and they're being assaulted by their female teachers. They call them lucky. They're like, good job, they don't recognize it as sexual assault as a violation, but rather celebrate it almost as a rite of passage. And you'll see comments, oh, I wish my teacher looked like that. Oh, I wish she, abused me. It's not funny, but it happens. Now, on the flip side, when it's a male teacher and it's a younger student, sometimes a younger female student, sometimes it's mixed. Sometimes they'll be like, oh, this is wrong, especially if she's on the younger side, like 12, 13. But when we start getting into the 16, 17 range, people start being like, well, was she flirting with him? None of that matters. The teacher-student dynamic is one of power. Okay, they're not aligned. They're not on the same level. There's a power dynamic there. There's a control factor there, right? And so teachers should never cross that line. I have had students of all genders flirt with me, and I'm just like, whoa, this is actually not going to happen. And I'm older, right? I'm not even in my 20s or like late 20s or early 30s. I'm older and it happens. And I'm like, and I get it because sometimes, especially like we see it happen with a therapist and client, we see it happen, student teacher, doctor patient. Sometimes when people are helping you, when they're providing that kind of support, feelings can get, a bit confusing and things like that. It is responsibility of the person providing the mentorship and the care to be like, no, that's not going to happen. But I feel like within our communities, we don't necessarily confront these things the way that we should. And I think it's because we have a history of distorted sexuality from legacy of slavery and all these kinds of things. But I just thought that they could have picked this up a little bit differently. I thought they could have handled it a lot differently. And if I was a writer on the show and sitting in that writer's room, I would have raised my hand and said, excuse me, are we going to address the fact that this is a professor, this is a student, he has power over her? Is nobody going to have a conversation about this? So I was just thinking about that, and again, I love this show. Like it literally is probably my favorite sitcom out in a modern time right now. So my critique of this particular storyline is coming from a place of love, coming from a fan and a place of appreciation for that. And I just encourage others that are thinking about, you know, developing these kinds of shows and these where these dynamics are, or even if you're writing books with these dynamics, you have to be very careful. We cannot, as the young people say, normalize predatory behavior. Even if the characters are attractive or what have you, close in age, doesn't matter. It is wrong. Wrong is wrong is wrong. And I just thought it was irresponsible of Miss Pat to do that. But go watch the show, please. Go watch the show. It's an amazing show, fantastic show. I want us to support more stuff, especially driven by Black women in comedy. The way that they are often shut out. Monique was not wrong. She's wrong about a lot of things, but she's not wrong about how Black women in comedy are treated. So I do hope that you go and that you support the Miss Pat show. Like I said, it's streaming in multiple places. I think you'll enjoy it. It's funny. Tammy Roman is there. She is fantastic on this show. Plays Pat's sister, has her own set of issues or what have you. She's really good in this show. She steals every scene that she's in, right? So definitely go watch the show. Yeah, and then the next time I see you guys, it'll be talking about Is God Is. Okay? All right.